Much of our day-to-day interaction with government is local in nature. Locally controlled entities collect our trash, plow our streets, fill our potholes, maintain our parks, field our 911 calls, staff our libraries, issue our building permits, and inspect our pools, restaurants, and gas pumps. Increasingly, though, Hoosier counties, municipalities, and townships are finding their authority and their funding limited by the Indiana General Assembly. Hi, I'm John Schwanitz, and on this week's show, we'll check on the 21st century viability of Thomas Jefferson's oft-quoted contention that the government closest to the people serves the people best. It's Indiana Lawmakers, from the State House to your house.
Indiana Lawmakers is produced by WFYI in association with Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations, with additional support provided by Par Ritchie.
Local governments in Indiana are heavily influenced by state oversight, often leading to tension between the two levels of government. Last year, Senate Enrolled Act 1 reconfigured finances to towns, school districts, and townships by significantly limiting property tax collection. This effectively minimized the funding through which governments at the local level could fund services and infrastructure. The measure, championed by Governor Bardon, provided substantial property tax relief, most notably to homeowners. Estimates suggest the new law will result in a loss of $1.8 billion in funding for local governments. This year, Indiana lawmakers are tasked with updating the state's tax codes to be in compliance with the congressional tax overhaul dubbed by President Trump as the One Big Beautiful Bill. While some of the federal tax changes will be adopted, state leaders noted that the cost of the tax breaks would be, in all likelihood, too expensive for the state to incur. The broad federal tax cuts included temporary deductions on car loan interest, deductions on workers receiving tips and overtime wages, and deductions for eligible seniors. Two bills proposed this legislative session seek to limit township government with the aim of increasing efficiency and eliminating duplication of effort. House Bill 1315 would require townships to dissolve and merge with neighboring cities or counties if they have fewer than 6,700 residents, lack a fire department, and if their salary expenses are more than twice the cost of the public assistance they distribute. Alternatively, Senate Bill 270 would mandate township consolidation on the basis of performance metrics to absorb lower-performing townships with more active ones. Township government has long been criticized for its role and purpose. This is particularly true in the urban and suburban communities in which the townships may overlap with a city that offers many of the same services. Township officials in the state, however, argue that they provide low-income residents with emergency rental, mortgage, or utility assistance more efficiently than other types of government. In addition, they maintain old cemeteries and provide other amenities that are available to all residents, such as parks and fire departments. Here to talk about the fundamental but often fraught relationship between state and local units of government are Republican Senator Rick Niemeyer of Lowell, ranking member of the Senate Local Government Committee, Democratic Representative Ed DeLaney of Indianapolis, assistant chair of his caucus, and former state representative Jeb Bardon, who has spent the past 3.5 years as Wayne Township trustee here in Marion County. And I have to distinguish that because there's 15 other Wayne Townships. I looked it up, so can't have any confusion. Senator, let me start with you. You took an interesting path here. You were in local government, on the drainage board, on the solid waste board. You were on the county council. You were a trustee. You were an assessor at the township level before you were in the House and then subsequently the Senate. You've seen the change over time. What is the relationship now between, say, townships or local government generally and the state legislature compared to what you saw when you were on the other side of the equation?
Sure. Well, we know when Mitch Daniels was governor, the Kernan Shepard report came out, basically was saying that township government had to be looked at pretty strongly and maybe even abolishing it. So that was kind of, and I was township trustee assessor at that time. So I was with the association, and even though I was with the association going down, we always talked, and I always spoke up that we got 1,001 townships in this state that you're probably not going to survive with 1,001 townships. You're going to have to look at merging or doing something different with township government because I believe in township government. It's the oldest form of government we have in this state, and it's closest to the people, so I believe very much in that type of government. So I've worked when I've been down here trying to put something together, and these gentlemen know this stuff over the years. There was population figure came out one year, just to eliminate with this population and just trying to downsize the township system. Well, this summer, we come up with a plan that at Township Associations in Bardon, trying to set a parameter of not looking at the population as strongly, but that's there, but look at what you're doing. Are you doing your job? Are you needed? Or do you need to merge with another township next to you to provide better service? And that's kind of how the bill got started.
And you mentioned the Kernan-Shepard report. That was 2007, if memory serves. And I was reminded the other day that their report was a mirror of a proposal made by Paul McNutt, the governor of Indiana, in 1936. So they've been there have been folks out to get the township system for a long time. Now, Jeb Bardon, you went the opposite path here. You, of course, were in 14 years in the legislature before you became a township trustee. Let me ask you the flip side. I mean, now that you're on the other side, do you see things differently, or have you seen dramatic change in that relationship?
Local government is an eye-opener. I mean, to be in the midst of day-to-day operations of a fire department, a small claims court, direct assistance, it has been an eye-opener. Being 14 years in the legislature has its perspective, but getting into the business of actually operating government it's an
Do you
education.
sense that you're sort of in the rope-a-dope, is the old boxing term, that are you, there seems as if a lot of blows are being struck toward local government or at local government. I don't know if they're all connecting, but do you feel that way?
Every day. I mean, I didn't come in under normal circumstances in terms of our township. Came into a unique mess, and so it has been 3.5 years.
After resignation, you were appointed, and then subsequently.
So we've really, we've worked aggressively to try and reinvent township government for Wayne Township.
I think the tax thing has been a big factor. This is where we get along. By the way, this is my great good friend, but even though I want to get rid of the trustees across the board, but what we've done on the tax side has hurt, and especially when you have both a fire department and in our case, a small claims court, but then also the need to give aid to the poorest. It's not working very well, and I hope that the shrinking the number of communities that have townships will help. We'll get some heft in some of those places that right now are just too small to function. But I think that we're hurting them in a lot of ways that are not a direct attack, but they're an indirect attack on their wallet.
And some of those townships are sitting on reserves, are they not?
That
could potentially be tapped to help cover some of the gap. I know you brought that up in the past, last session even.
That's a problem.
Well, let's take these. You've mentioned now sort of the fallout from last year's SB 1 and the property tax reform. I don't want to leave the township reform idea because you, again, came up last summer, you looked at it, came up with a proposal that was a point system. Then you got points for being efficient with your fire services, with your delivery of financial assistance to those who are in need, et cetera, et cetera. Did you have elections where they contested elections, et cetera, et cetera? The House took a different approach. It was a similar goal, which was reducing the number, more than 1,000, as you pointed out, townships right now, but basically looking at who's next to a city, who's next to a large population area, and that sort of approach. You found a way in this era of non-compromise just this week to come up with how those two would fit together. So it's part a point system and then part geography. Is that?
The point system never leaves, even the ones that, the amendment that's in there now that went through the House that they put in with is 80% inside a corporation and 51% of the populations in that city or town. But the township has to score a 4. That means there's some of the stuff they're not doing. If they score a 3, they stay as a township. Okay, so you got the bigger townships. Some of them are going to be next on fire protection, maybe a little bit, or some other issue out there. But if they're doing their job on the rest of it, and especially when it comes to assistance and stuff, they're never going to get hit on those points. A lot of these townships might score 1 or 2 or 3 points, but they're still going to survive and be part of that government because they didn't score a 4. It was set up through the Department of Local Government Finance and the State Board of Accounts that these things are things that can be checked. There are things that are there for everyone to look at. If a township doesn't quite agree with something that comes out, they can appeal it directly to one of those agencies. But if it's set up, if you score 4, then you're going to have to look at merging.
Meaning you've got problems.
You got problems.
You got a
But you're not,
You got-
in
You haven't
your eyes,
doing
you're
your
not as
reports.
efficient as you should be.
Kind of took the population figure out at this point. You know, maybe that can creep back in some other time, but right now, it just, whether you're doing your job or not. And in some cases, these small townships, it's not their fault. I mean, they just don't have enough people, there's not enough revenue there, and it just makes sense to merge with someone else. And the amendment the House did, which we put in, we pushed it out another year to 29. What I hope happens is these townships look at each other, they're gonna know they're scoring a 4 or 5. They get together locally, they decide where they wanna go, what's the best merger for them, have public hearings, and get this done before the bill takes effect. Because that, and as Ed knows, and this gentleman knows too, that statute's always been there. They could always merge,
Yes.
always.
We
So you're
haven't said-
encouraging the sort of the matchmaking to
hope-
occur on its own
hope
by moving
yeah.
that deadline
because
back.
then you're going to get to dialogue, and even if it goes all the way to the last point, there's still dialogue between the county commissioner and the trustees of where they think will be the best merge.
Now, the House plan, the estimate was it might eliminate as many as 600, close to 700 townships of the more than 1,000. Originally, your bill would have been maybe around, what, 300? So where does this end up? Or do we know how many of the
Anticipating anywhere from 300 to 340 in that area,
will
320.
be eliminated out of the
be
1,008 or
Yes.
give or take?
Yeah.
This
And
is
it's
a
kind of,
dangerous idea, by the way.
yeah.
I'm just sitting here thinking about the school districts. We got 270 of them.
Yeah.
I'm even thinking about some of our small cities. I'm even thinking about our counties. Take your proposition. We do not need 92 counties.
Exactly.
Are we going to set up a scoring system?
Although that's
I'm
in the
fascinated
Indiana,
by
the
this.
counties are the only thing that's in the Indiana Constitution.
I understand.
The cities and towns are all legislative, right?
I understand.
So you want another constitutional amendment? Isn't one a session enough?
I'm just
I mean,
thinking about this. You're saying if you're not efficient, you're not producing the job, you're not adequate to the task, we'll get rid of you. Well, the citizens are going to maybe tempted by this idea. I'm fascinated by
well,
it.
maybe we should go dust off the Kernan-Shepard report. I believe schools were dealt with. I don't think it was limited solely to township. I think it
The
does
schools
look
are the
at.
similar problem. Same problem you pointed out.
Yeah.
That it's hard for somebody who's eligible to merge, who can even see the advantages, to say, I'm giving up my office, I'm making a deal with the trustee of the township next to me. That's hard. It's the same way with the school district. You've kind of cut through it and say that if you flunk certain tests, then you're going to get the chance to merge. You're going to merge.
You're saying that model could have lots
That
of
model is
applica-
dangerous. It's unique.
in
I would do it
a,
to
in
the
a good way. You're thinking here.
One of my many pet noirs is the homeowners association. I would do that. I'd merge all of them into one. They're taking over the legislature. I mean, we're spending more time, right, passing bills on the bloody homeowners association.
Boy, don't pick a fight with homeowners.
I
that's,
know.
Well, Jeb, I know this doesn't affect you necessarily for any number of
Not in the immediate.
in the immediate future. For any number of reasons. But your organization, your colleagues across the state eventually said, okay,
Yeah.
we can live with this. Is that just a matter of this is sort of the lesser of
No,
potential evils? I can't imagine that there are township trustees that want to wave goodbye to the offices they've held in some cases for years.
I think it's a reflection. There are trustees who want to provide services in the best way possible. And I think that the bill as it stands today creates a system for moving through that process and not taking away services. You could face just blowing them out of the water and risk losing that safety net, or you could do it the right way and keep the safety net in place.
So does anyone have any concern that things might fall through the cracks? A lot of the smaller township trustee offices, they'll do cemetery upkeep, sort of those out-of-the-way cemeteries that nobody, from pioneer days, you mentioned fires, but also for those who are in need for assistance for utility payments and those sorts of things. Any fears, Ed DeLaney, that can't be accomplished by the county?
That is one of the risks, but that's what we have county government for, is eventually to say, look, if we're, for example, not taking care of the cemeteries, the county may have to take it.
It'll get done.
I think it'll get done. I think one of the most interesting things, and I don't know, Senator, if you agree, I think a lot of the tension about township government is driven by the problem about fire service. We want better fire service. We're paying $1 to $2 million for a fire truck. Okay, we need more professional firefighters because we're losing a lot of volunteer firefighters. So I think part of the pressure has really nothing to do with the social service component or even the competency of trustees. It's just it's getting to be a big money issue in some places. And we have way too many fire service units. I can't even count the types. We have fire territories, fire service districts, township, city. Am I right that the pressure is partly because of the fire issues?
I think you're absolutely right.
And this would make them bigger
because,
departments. They're more professional.
What's
Is that
going to
the
happen?
idea?
You're going to have, putting budgets together, putting assessed values together, and you're going to have more coordination because you got townships now. They're all buying their own fire protection, or they're with volunteer fire department stuff that they need to coordinate when they're buying their equipment. Like you don't need a big hook and ladder truck in some of these areas. Maybe you need one in the area, one in the county to provide those big fire issues you have. But I think it'll be more coordination. The biggest part, I think, is the medical stuff, too. They have to look strong to get the medical because that's what more people are going to use on a daily basis than the fire protection, of course. And but the fire departments are so much different they were than when I was in the trustee system. They have to have training now. They have to get certified. The insurance will not cover you if you don't have that certification in the insurance. You got to have a clean driver's license. You got to have all that stuff put together. So it's a big commitment for volunteers. That's why we're looking more professional type firefighters because it's hard to get volunteers that are doing other jobs and put all that time in with the family.
Well, the ambulance service has risen as a big issue. I didn't detect that 15 years ago in the legislature, but now we've caught on. We have to get ambulance service to all parts of the state, and we're having trouble.
Have a majority of counties, right, that don't have hospitals.
Right.
Never mind level 1 trauma.
We're struggling
units.
with that.
Yeah.
Well, when you talk about training firefighters or medics, or you talk about buying fire equipment, this is all money, and it gets back to something Ed DeLaney was talking about a moment ago, where townships and cities and counties continue to feel squeezed. Senate Bill 1 last year was the much ballyhooed property tax reform, which essentially, because remember, when you're looking at property taxes, the state's just a pass-through agent. The money's all going to the locals anyway, of course. And $1 billion plus that was going to go there in the past won't go there now in the biennium. And now this year, as the state moved to align itself with the big beautiful bill and some of the tax reductions there, we're looking at another $50 million plus that's not going to go to locals. Any concern there that locals should have with this continuing tightening of the spigot?
I think with the township and the volunteer fire departments and the counties that have a vast amount of unincorporated area in their county, maybe 80–90% of it is unincorporated area. The counties are going to have to come in now and help more with that when they go with the lit tax, the public safety, because townships aren't in that formula, and schools aren't in that formula yet either. Well, we have to do something with that. And Representative DeLaney knows that. So I think it's a real challenging right now, but the counties are going to have to get more involved in fire protection as far as getting money available for these local fire departments, fire districts, and volunteer firemen. So it's going to be a different system.
It is it's a tough moment because we affected their income tax at the same time that we affected the property tax revenue. And we have, three basic types of local government. We have those that are static, those that are growing, and those that are really growing. And the ones that are really growing are stressed because the tax system doesn't allow them to build those fire stations they need, doesn't allow them to staff them. I mean, I hear about mayors who can build a station, but they can't get the staff because they don't have the money. We've got to figure out how these different patterns can all succeed.
Well, is there a formula right now? The General Assembly last year said, okay, we're taking away money that has been flowing into your coffers, but we're going to give you increased capacity to tax in some cases. It's very complicated,
but not at the township level.
Not at the township level, right? And so you're in a different situation. And even if you look at those who do have the authority, the municipalities and the counties, do they really want to? Basically, taxpayers end up paying the same amount. It's just that now the check is going to a different governmental entity. Are you feeling that?
Absolutely. If push comes to shove, I think taxpayers don't want to lose services. And our biggest concern right now with the change in the income tax formula is we go from a state formula for distribution of the county option income tax to a county-generated formula for the distribution of local income tax. Potentially, as a township, we could lose 15% of our budget, and that's a frightening number.
Does this get worse before it gets better, or is this? Next, I presume next budget session, long session, we'll have to address this in some way.
That's democracy. That's how we learn. we stumble, and we clean it up. That's what we're doing here, and that's a good thing.
So something's going to have to change.
Yeah,
You're
it'll have to.
It can't remain the same. And you agree, Senator? That it can't remain the way it is?
The pressures
No,
are
it cannot.
there. You know?
It's not.
We got to face
It's a
it.
whole different ballgame now with the lit tax. And what I think I like about, of course, we all from local government, that it's money that stays home. People can see transparency in it, where it's going, no matter what formula you come up with on this lit tax. But they're going to want services. They're going to, and public safety comes in, and ambulance is a big part of the township stuff, and the general assistance. I don't know how much you have general assistance, but quite a bit, I would think, where you're at.
Yeah.
That's a big thing. That's direct help to people that come in. That I always said Township was a direct help for over a difficult period. It's not supposed to be consistent, but somebody gets in trouble to get out of work. They need their utility bills paid or some food. You can jump in and help them in a 30-day basis.
Yeah.
And that's what's so good about that system.
It's a lifeboat.
So everybody agrees something's going to have to change next session.
Oh, yeah.
But the critical issue is counties and cities are going to be focused on police, fire, ambulance. That's a priority for counties. You can lose in that fight the focus on taking care of folks in that critical moment who are facing eviction, who are facing loss of utilities, who are hungry.
Of course, there are also things like libraries, schools. Again,
Yes,
not necessarily
yes,
controlled
absolutely.
by counties,
Well, the libraries
but
are
local
getting
schools.
squeezed this year. First time I've seen that.
It's-
They're under pressure. Some think they're overfunded, God forbid, but that's what we're hearing.
Yeah, they want direct control of that.
Yeah, so county government is going to become much more powerful than it was.
Well,
And you're
you
contributing
led me
that.
to my final sort of
I did not
topic
vote for
here.
that bill. I did not vote for that bill. And the libraries.
Okay.
He has
they're
plausible
binding-
deniability. He's,
Their binding review, I did not
Well,
support
but
that.
you see, this is the dilemma. Is the county going to come stronger? I think the answer is yes. Over time, they're becoming stronger.
Well,
That's a fact.
and again, who has the clout here is an interesting issue, because it's not just the purse strings which increasingly are being squeezed. Preemptions, which is a fancy way, I guess, of saying that we are telling you, if you're the General Assembly, I don't want to speak for you, telling locals, you can't do this. Even though we were a home rule state, ostensibly, you can't do this. And so far, you can't regulate plastic bags at grocery stores. You can't ban puppy sales at pet stores. You can't govern landlord-tenant relationships.
It's getting more serious.
You
'cause
can't.
We passed a bill yesterday that's going to deal with, zoning and
Local
housing
zoning for, that was a
controls.
big one,
Yeah,
HB 1001,
we're
which does have opt-out provisions, but
Right.
we could spend 10
We're
shows talking
squeezing.
about.
We're
So
squeezing.
is this a concern? Is there some kind of power grab here that's going to cost not just townships, but municipal and county government?
In this session, I've been down there since 2012, really, and 14 from the Senate, that it seems like there's a lot of pressure on local control of trying to take that some way back to the state level on some of these issues, which I don't agree with. I don't vote for those bills. The locals, and say, well, these locals didn't make a right decision. Well, if they didn't make a right decision, then there's the votes coming up, okay? And you can control that, just like a school board, kind of the same way. You have local control of that. And when the states start mandating, especially on the rental type stuff we looked at in that 1001, I didn't agree with that. Locals have the ability to do what they need to do. And if they don't, then somebody else will try to run and make that change. So I don't know why it seems like we got a pressure on local control this year. And I'm all for about home rule. I think most of us are sitting there. So how far do we go with it? I don't know.
Well, yeah, I think the argument I hear, it's never stated, is that while you may be happy with what's going on in your county and your township, we here at the State House are not happy with your county. Yeah. Okay. And so we're going to change the rules for you. We're seeing that. They're fooling around with my school district. They're fooling around with my police department. Now they're fooling around with my courts. This is in Indianapolis,
This
the
is
state
the
capital.
way court or judges are approved. Now,
Yeah.
there's local bar association weighs in.
Oh,
This
yeah.
would be
So-
more
so
gubernatorial
all this
control.
is fascinating. I say, we may be fat, dumb, and happy, but could you leave us alone?
Is there-
Because we
is-
are fat, dumb, and happy. Stop.
Is this just is this going to happen from here on out? This kind of preemption, this kind of battle for control, or do we reach a plateau at some point?
We can always look over the fence and say our neighbor's yard should be better. That's what we're doing. And so we're going to control their yard. That's what the State House is doing. And I'm really worried about that. That's a trend that I think is destructive. Even though I'm a great one for consolidation and uniformity, I have to say, if people are basically satisfied with their local government, what are we doing to trash it? So I'm talking out of both sides of my mouth, admittedly.
So you're not eager to see the governor and state police control law enforcement in the mile square
Yes,
of downtown
I do not need
Indy?
the governor, who lives up the street from me. I do not need him running my police department. Sorry, Mike.
Jim Bardon, we're almost out of time. I'll give you the final word. Again, now has all this talk made you regret leaving the General Assembly? Clearly, that's where the power is. I mean, is it too late to go back?
You know, my concern in the big picture of all of this is people throw snowballs at the State House and they wind up creating avalanches. We are kind of in that right now. And I think, Ed, you indicated the impact on our school district. I mean, I think we're all very concerned about what's coming and how do you stop that momentum.
Well, this story definitely will have future chapters, and I'm sure we'll be talking about it again, not necessarily this session, but certainly next year with the budget. Thank you all for being here to chat with us. Again, my guests have been Republican Senator Rick Niemeyer of Lowell, Democratic Representative Ed DeLaney of Indianapolis, and Wayne Township Trustee Jeb Bardon. And time now for our weekly conversation with analyst Ed Feigenbaum, publisher of the newsletter Indiana Legislative Insight, part of Hannah News Service. Ed, any surprises in the roundtable?
Well, it's interesting that we heard some public acknowledgments that we ought to just pass laws and then come back next session and correct them. And we saw that last year with SB 1, the property tax bill as well, where they acknowledged that there were going to be some things in that legislation that they didn't quite know what the consequences would flow from, and that they'd come back in 2026 and they'd correct them. We saw them correct some of those, but again, we still don't know what all the impacts are going to be because some of that stuff isn't going to really hit until next year. And then we heard the acknowledgement that local governments are going to suffer from some of the things in terms of the legislation we were just talking about with the township reforms this year. And well, let's see, and we can come back next year.
Seems to be a broad acknowledgement that something will have to be done to help some of the local governmental units financially and otherwise. Final hours of the session this week, what stood out?
I think it was interesting that on some of the final third readings and then the concurrences that things weren't quite as cut and dried as we might have seen in the past, and there was a need to keep the voting boards open a little bit longer on some things in order to get that 26th vote.
Not partisan divides here. I mean, it was all over the board.
And even in the House, we almost saw some of the opposite too, because the Speaker would very quickly close the voting board when we got to 52 votes there. But on one third reading vote in the Senate early in the week, we saw a gaming bill pass with just 26 votes, and that 26th vote, the last vote on the board, was from a senator who in committee the week before said, well, I've never voted for a gaming bill before, and I'm only voting for this one just to send it to the floor where we can work on it, and he was the one who put it over the top.
Always interesting and always surprising. Ed, as always, appreciate your input.
Thank you, John.
On the next Indiana Lawmakers, the General Assembly's caucus leaders will be back to assess what was and wasn't accomplished in the 2026 legislative session. Well, that's it for this week. I'm John Schwannis, and on behalf of everyone involved in our program, WFYI Public Media and Indiana's other public broadcasting stations, I thank you for joining us, and I invite you to visit WFYI.org for more State House news. Until next week, take care.
Indiana Lawmakers is produced by WFYI in association with Indiana Public Broadcasting Stations, with additional support provided by Par Ritchie.